the Tudors Dynasty Podcast.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Tudors Dynasty Podcast. I'm Rebecca Larson. It may surprise you, but recently I've received some requests for an episode on Thomas Seymour. While I'd love to tell you all about the things I've discovered in my research, I need to save some of that for the book that I'm working on. For those who have been following me for a long time, you know I've been working on this book for many, many years. My research is intact, but my life has taken some twists and turns that have led me to putting the book on the back burner for about a year. So instead of promising you that it will be out soon, I will just tell you that I'm still working on it and that I hope after my trip to England in June that I can once again return to writing about a man who has intrigued me since 2016. So, today's episode, I'd like to not only discuss Thomas Seymour, but also his family. When it comes to the Seymours in general, there is not much information available. Let's begin with maybe their ancestry. Legend claims that the first Seymour, or Saint Mar, arrived with William the Conqueror in 1066. However, the first documented Seymour is not found until the 13th century on a land agreement. This agreement bears the coat of arms that have become the hallmark of the Seymour family, a pair of golden wings. When it comes to the Seymour men, many believe that it wasn't until the 16th century that they looked for advantageous marriages, especially Thomas Seymour. Quite the contrary, actually. Not only did most men of the time look for a marriage that was advantageous, but earlier Seymour men were no different. If we go back to the early part of the 15th century, Sir Thomas Seymour's great-great-grandfather, Roger Seymour, married Maud Estermy. Maud's father, Sir William Estermy, was a prominent figure in the royal household of Princess Blanche and Queen Joan, and a member of the King's Council under Henry IV. The Estermy family's high standing provided ample reason for Roger to take up residence in London. His wife, Maud, and her sister Agnes were co-heiresses of their father's estate, and brought the Seymour family considerable wealth and status. In the late 15th century, Sir John Seymour inherited the position of hereditary warden of Saverneck Forest, located in Wiltshire. Sir John and his wife Marjorie resided at the stately manor house situated just outside the forest. You know it as Wolf Hall. Remarkably, their descendants still reside there today. Now, during the reign of Henry VIII, the king's passion for hunting led to his frequent visits to Saverneck Forest. This provided Sir John Seymour with a golden opportunity to curry favor with the second Tudor king. It was during the reign of the first Tudor king, Henry VII, that John gained his knighthood. Having proven himself at the Battle of Blackheath in 1497, he was knighted on the battlefield by his commander. In 1513, Sir John served Henry VIII at the Battle of Tyrone, which led to his coveted position of Knight of the Body and Groom of the Chamber to King Henry VIII. He served the king faithfully at the Battle of Tyrone and continued to do so until his death. Sir John's position as hereditary warden of Saverneck Forest was an important one, and the Seymour family held the post for many years to come. Their proximity to the king during hunting trips and their service to the crown helped to cement the family's influence at court. Sir John's legacy was carried on by his sons, who would rise to even greater heights of power and influence during the reign of Edward VI. But it was not only the sons of Sir John and Marjorie Seymour who made their mark on history. One must not forget their daughter Jane, who became the third wife of King Henry VIII in 1536 and gave him his long-awaited fourth son the following year, future Edward VI. The question may always remain as to whether or not Jane was as ambitious as the men in her family. Was Jane merely a pawn, or was she aware that her actions could cause the death of her predecessor, Anne Boleyn? In Jane's defense, how could she have known that Anne Boleyn would be executed? She witnessed the downfall of her former mistress, Queen Catherine of Aragon, and saw how Catherine was set aside, sent to the country, and out of sight of the king. So why on earth would Jane not expect the same would happen with Anne? So can we please not vilify Jane? Anne Boleyn is rarely vilified for what she did to Catherine of Aragon, and so we must not treat Jane any differently. Let's talk about the history of this Seymour family. In 1494, Sir John Seymour married Marjorie Wentworth, daughter of Sir Henry Wentworth of Suffolk. Sir Henry was a distinguished member of the English gentry, serving as a member of Parliament for Suffolk, and was appointed as Knight of the Shire in 1489. He also held positions as a Justice of the Peace and Sheriff of Norfolk and Suffolk. The Wentworth family held strong family ties that went back to the Mortimer, Percy, and Neville families. But it was their descent from King Edward III that later gave Marjorie Seymour's children a trace of royal blood, setting the stage for her daughter Jane to become Queen Consort of England. It was a fortuitous combination of events that propelled the Seymours to the forefront of Wiltshire society in the early 16th century. Although they already had a substantial standing in the region, it was only through a series of timely and favorable events, including royal patronage, that they rose to become one of the most prominent families in the Shire. Sir John Seymour's great-grandfather and namesake played a crucial role in this ascent, inheriting not only the Seymour-Beauchamp fortunes, but also a significant portion of Sir William Estourmey's vast lands. The inheritance secured the Seymours' position, and their legacy was further solidified when he obtained Wolf Hall, an estate that would become synonymous with the family name. Marjorie Seymour's experience as a lady-in-waiting in the royal households of Elizabeth Tilney, Countess of Surrey, and Queen Elizabeth of York provided her with the opportunity and knowledge to educate and groom her future daughters to potentially follow in her footsteps. Serving one's queen was deemed one of the highest honors a woman could achieve in this era. In the years following their union, Sir John and Marjorie Seymour were blessed with a growing brood of children, producing 4 sons and a daughter within the first decade of their marriage. Eventually, the couple would become proud parents to 10 children, 6 of whom survived into adulthood. Their sons, Edward and Thomas, are known best. Edward went on to become Duke of Somerset and Lord Protector after the death of Henry VIII and the succession of the minor Edward VI. Thomas Seymour went on to become Baron Seymour of Sudeley and Lord High Admiral. Both men rose high and both men fell hard. But what happened? Well, like any ambitious men at Tudor court, their status became a threat to other men. Men who were envious of their power. Men who wished for more power themselves. Men who knew who to back to gain their own wealth and status. For years, I've been telling you to look no further than John Dudley for the downfall of the Seymour brothers. His own rise after the death of Edward Seymour suggests he obtained exactly what he was after, near absolute power. But even John Dudley wasn't safe from execution, was he? When we look at Thomas Seymour and his marriage to Catherine Parr, Many see it as a marriage that merely brought Thomas wealth and power. It did, yes, but I still believe it was very much a love match. Catherine Parr certainly loved Thomas, and his letters to her suggest he was also in love with her. To argue that his thoughts of marrying Princess Elizabeth after the death of Parr suggest he was merely after the crown for himself are, in my opinion, unfounded. As always, Thomas was looking for a way to protect himself and his own wealth. He was, after all, the favorite uncle of King Edward VI, which put a large target on his back. But that's as far as I plan to go into any theories on that topic for now. Thomas Seymour was not the only Seymour man to marry in secret and garner scorn from the council. His own nephew, the son of his eldest brother, also named Edward, secretly wed Lady Catherine Grey. This marriage not only spit in the face of Queen Elizabeth I, because Catherine was in the line of succession, but also worried many that another Seymour had eyes for the throne. While a Seymour never sat on the throne of England, they definitely came much closer than any other family of the Tudor era. Others who tried or were suspected of trying, like Henry Stafford, Duke of Buckingham, and Henry Howard, Earl of Surrey, lost their heads for it. Not only did Thomas Seymour lose his head, so did his brother Edward, Duke of Somerset, and his nephew, Edward, Earl of Hertford. The price of ambition at Tudor court was the downfall of many men and the loss of favor for many families. The Seymour family will always be remembered thanks to the rise of their daughter, Jane Seymour, and her son, Edward VI. The downfall of Thomas and both Edwards is a cautionary tale for men who fly too close to the sun. Thank you for joining me for this short episode on the Seymours. I hope you're intrigued to want to learn a little bit more about them and dive into your own research to learn about this fascinating family. Thank you so much for joining me. Until next time.